Not every customer is created equal, and
Yeah.
it's not a moral judgment or a value judgment. I think every company should know who their ICP is. You have to know who your ICP is. And if you roll out a feature to 100 customers and 95 hate it and 5 love it, that doesn't mean you did a bad job. If the 5 that love it are in your ICP, it may mean that you need to fire 95 customers and go and replace them with ones that are in your ideal customer profile. And I think this is the value of those beta groups, because you can really be very picky. You decide who gets into it. It's not a democracy. I'm going to pick the companies. I'm going to pick the users that I'm going to spend my time with. Maybe I do, I shadow them while they're using the feature, or I do an interview, or I just look more at the web analytics or the product metrics that are coming from them. Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. The dreaded introduction, make yourself sound interesting, and all of that, an intro that may resonate with your audience in particular, is I've been working in and around dev tools and kind of infrastructure software for over a decade in a variety of kind of go-to-market roles that have included some kind of product management, maybe more informally as part of a startup. When you work at a small company that wants to be a big company, there are many hats. And so I've been doing a lot of kind of certainly product strategy work, but then also in my career, I did some more formal product management early on, and kind of in terms of some web properties and things like that. So really excited to chat with you and broach a bunch of topics in and around this area.
So I've noticed that, kind of random tangent, but so you spent a lot of your time in Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. I actually did look at going to the VCU Brand Center, Virginia Commonwealth. I don't know if you heard about that advertising.
Yeah. I did my undergraduate at VCU. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Really cool campus because of how old everything is over there. And it just felt like you're going to Europe, just the old buildings and stuff like that. And just really, really cool space. That's a pretty far cry from where you are right now. I'm looking at your light switch and your French illustrative art behind you, and also cheating by looking at your LinkedIn that you're currently located not in Virginia. Could you tell me a little bit about where you're at right now and what led to you making this career move?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, shout out to RVA. So you brought it up, so I can pile on. And
Really cool city.
Yeah, VCU Brand Center. Like most people probably don't know the Geico Gecko. So iconic advertising was created in Richmond, Virginia, an ad agency called the Martin Agency, and they brought a lot of not only talent but also money to Richmond, and then we're associated with a lot of the business school at VCU and go RVA. So I grew up in Richmond and actually started in tech in Virginia, another town in Virginia, which is another university town with Virginia Tech, and made my start in SaaS over there. Kind of some of my earliest product management roles were for that company that was acquired by Rackspace, the hosting provider out of actually San Antonio, but got my start in tech in Virginia. And then around when I was getting into tech, I met a woman who was French, and we got married. And 21 years later, we were still together, and she lived in the US with me, and we started her family there she was in the US for almost 20 years. And she wanted to come home, and I love France, and I was like, okay, let's do it. And so I moved to Europe about 2 years ago. And as part of that transition, left my Silicon Valley based venture-backed startup, and then joined another venture-backed startup, but based in Oslo, Norway. And so I've been working here at Unleashed for about 2 years. Been doing many of the same things, but getting to do it from Europe, which is a lot of fun. And I think a dream for a lot of Americans.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So it's her turn to relocate the family. So that's the big crux of it. That's so cool. And I'm sure she really had to twist your arm to go to Europe of all things.
Yeah. It feels, I still wake up some days and is this real life? Of course, I miss my family in the US. Luckily, we get to visit them regularly, but yeah, the day to day in Europe is great, as many people have visited here now. And I'm not too far outside of Paris, and so getting to the airport's super easy when I need to travel for work or go see family. So it's great.
Yeah, as much as I really want to get into a talking shop about the topics you brought, one of the benefits of my podcast is I fancy myself a amateur anthropologist and get to ask some questions around my curiosity. What have you felt has been different about the tech ecosystem in Europe? I guess how work is done, because there's just a lot of great company like Neat. I had two guests from Neat, which is a video conferencing based out of Oslo,
Mm,
and they're like the video conferencing tech stack for Red Bull racing, like F1, very European.
mm,
Just like there's just really great companies coming out of France. I met one of the founders in Paris of MebuSearch, which is like AI powered like search APIs. And there's just there's a lot of like dark horses coming out of Europe. What's been your impression so far working in here instead of the US?
uh, it's a good question. It's a tough question, and it's very existential in a lot of ways, because I think a lot of things are very different. And a lot of things are very similar. The way that you have a lot of, what's the difference between working for a company based out of San Francisco and one that's based out of, I don't know, Ann Arbor. It's that there are differences, but there's, I would say, first and foremost, there's a global tech culture. And so, or companies, especially venture-backed companies, in Europe, they're the creme de la creme, often backed by US based investors. And so those investors are going to be looking for similar kind of attributes in the founders that they back, right? The ambitions of the team, the product market fit, like the market size, and all of that creates a similarity in how they operate. I would say maybe the biggest difference between European teams and US teams is they're both very hardworking, but the European teams tend to understand that. I'll use a sports analogy, right? If you want to do a marathon, you don't go out and run a marathon every day, right? There's training for the event, and that includes recovery. And if you don't recover, then you're going to run one marathon and you're going to injure yourself and never run another marathon. And so European founders, as while I still get emails at all times of day from my CEO and things like that, but there is a sense of, okay, let's take a breather, let's take some vacation, right? And they have families and all of that. And I would say it's more balanced. It's still not a 9 to 5. And that's the big thing. People have a maybe overly romantic view of what it is in Europe to have a job. And when you work at a venture-backed startup, it's just not a 9 to 5. You can never make it a 9 to 5. However, compared to US based companies, I see that there's more balance, which I personally appreciate. You can still work hard, be very ambitious, work to take this 30-person company and make it into a $1 billion company, but you don't have to sacrifice every other aspect of your life to do it.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind is tempered, right? Adam Grant's book Originals talks about how certain people change the world and versus others who don't. And he talks about the concept of tempered radicalism, and he compares different leaders of the women's rights movement of like how the ones that were pushing hard weren't getting anywhere, and a strategic partnership with the women's suffrage movement, which was a little more tempered. They wanted the same things, but it was more of a tempered message of, hey, we just don't want our husbands drinking all the time and beating us. We want some legislation here, like a more strategically focused. I think if you want to use marketing language, they had a more targeted segment of what they were trying to accomplish. And then that eventually led to more broader changes to women's rights, because they were radicals, but they were strategic in like how they paced and what they decided to focus on and push their message. And what I think is super interesting about your experience is that to be successful at a tech startup that's venture backed, geography doesn't change the work required to get the job done.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
The market's global. That's the reality. The market is global.
Yeah.
And like it's a land grab. If you don't do it, someone else is going to do it. None of that changes. However, you can still go on vacation every once in a while, and the world's not going to end. And in fact, you come back energized and ready to really ready to do it again.
Yeah, in Reed Hastings' book, No Rules, where he talks about the Netflix culture of primarily they don't have a HR manual. It's more like treat people like adults. If you want to hire talented people, they want to be treated like adults. And Reed would take like 6 weeks of vacation a year to go mountaineering in Europe and stuff. He was a CEO of Netflix, and it's definitely not 9 to 5 there, but it's more about, I guess, the judgment and the decisions you make over time. I'm curious from your perspective of this word that you brought up in like when before we started recording, you brought up this concept of feature ops.
Mhm.
And I've never heard that phrase before. I don't know, maybe I've been under a rock, but I'm curious to hear like how that relates to the new reality we live in with AI, building with AI, and maybe how that ties into the whole conversation on taste is more important than ever now, and judgment's more important than ever with AI. I'm going to just start with a big question bomb on you, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah, I think this is you haven't heard of it. I take that personally because this is one of the things that I've been trying to share with more people. And so I appreciate the forum. And I think it's a concept that'll really resonate with your audience because I think the way in which software has been built over the last decade has a lot of advantages, but it also leaves a lot on the table. And feature ops really, I think, addresses that. If you'll indulge me, I'll tell a little bit of a story so that it makes sense in context. I think a lot of your audience will be familiar with the concept of DevOps. And DevOps is when you are working at a venture-backed startup and you have a platform or application that's used by millions of users, right? Things like uptime and reliability, all of these things are super important. You have gaming platform and people can't play, it's like they're going to be really mad and they're going to go to another gaming platform where they can play. And there are real business implications of having software that's not reliable. And you brought up Netflix. So Netflix is the poster child for this kind of way of operating, where they built processes that automated a lot of things that are necessary in order to run applications 24/7, zero downtime, but also make updates regularly so that you're constantly improving it. And broadly, this set of practices has become known as DevOps over the last 10 years or so, when there's tons of components and within that I won't get into. But one of them that I will mention is something called CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous deployment. This is the idea that as you're making changes and updates to that application, that starts with code that's written on a developer's laptop and then makes it into a staging environment, then makes it into a QA environment, then it makes it into a production environment, and you changing the behavior that an end user sees is a result of code moving along this process. When we automate that process, we call it CI/CD, and that process itself has really had enormous benefit and improvement in the overall kind of speed at which we can create software and the reliability of that software. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just for the benefit of me and the listener, could you give like an anti-pattern of CI/CD just to give like an idea of what's the world look like without it?
Yeah. Without it, it looks logging into your favorite application or software, not even your favorite, just like something that you need to use. I need to do a bank transfer and getting a notification that this application is currently experiencing a maintenance window, right? We'll be down from midnight on Friday until 2 a.m. on Monday. When you don't have automation, you oftentimes that changing something is very risky. And so in order to mitigate that risk, organizations will, one, do it infrequently, and then two, put a bunch of warning signs around it, basically make the application unavailable during that change. And that's probably the biggest kind of indication that companies are doing it the old way. If you think about it, you probably have noticed a reduction in the number of like maintenance window things that you get nowadays because there are techniques in order to be able to update important critical services without taking them offline. But in the 80s and 90s, it was just companies would update critical systems like once a year, and it would be a big thing and everybody would be on call. And now you have companies that are updating in production literally hundreds of times a day.
Have you ever seen the Apple TV show Silo?
No, I haven't.
there's a scene in it, and it's this underground bunker. And I'll say this really quick, but it's a very similar image to what you just described, where there's this generator that's been going on for 100 years and it's not running well, but it lights and powers everything, like the greenhouses and everything like that. And so, yeah, the scene of, hey, we have to turn it off and replace like one of the rotors or like pieces in there, because this will just break and then we're going to be all in darkness forever. And so like the government, everybody, get your candles. We're going to be doing a planned outage of all the light in here. And like, we don't know if this is going to work. And like, we have to do the replacement. And there's this high drama scene of her like going in this dangerous giant engine to replace this part. And there's people falling from they have climbing rigs to get up to the place and stuff like that. And it's this very like high risk change. And yeah, like that makes like total sense, where if it's very like human supervisee, for lack of a better vocabulary, it's okay, we're going to reduce the risk by giving ourselves like a couple days to fix things as they break at the expense of the customer experience.
Yep, exactly. I have to add that show to my watch list, because that's exactly how it used to be before DevOps. And yet there are still problems with applications. And one of the problems that we've noticed is that, especially in the enterprise space, maybe less so in the consumer space, although I think if you dig hard enough, there are lots of applications that we all use as individuals that leave some things to be desired. But especially in the enterprise space, applications are still they're still not great user experiences, right? They're still buggy. They're inconsistent across platforms. Like it's still hard to make something that truly is a wonderful user experience. And in our view, for all of the benefits that DevOps has created in terms of moving away from this default, okay, applications are going to be down for 2 days, we're going to update it, is that because DevOps is very focused on code delivery pipelines and not the thing that customers actually see and care about, which is features, there's a little bit of a disconnect between the ability for product teams to really optimize the end user experience, because a lot of the things that they're measuring that you can measure very easily with DevOps are not the things that customers ultimately care about. As a, for instance, if I'm a user of, I don't know, like the Netflix mobile app, right? The things that I notice are, oh, they made it really easy to search for languages in French. That's something that I notice because it's a feature or functionality. I'm not going to notice that, oh, Netflix, apparently I was able to log on today, so they must have really optimized their CI/CD workflow so that they had a zero downtime deployment. Like I can say those things because I'm like an insider and I know how it works, but that's obviously not something that any normal user would ever say. And so what Feature Ops does is it takes this idea of automation, of frequent updates, of data-driven decision-making, and applies it directly to the things that customers care about, the actual features and functionality. And it gives engineering teams and product managers the ability to say, okay, like I have a hypothesis that if we do this in the application, that some outcome is going to happen. People are going to be happier. They're going to give us more stars on the iTunes store. We're going to see the lifetime value of an average customer increase. We're going to see more time on page, whatever those metrics are. And oftentimes it's a basket of metrics. We want customers to spend more, contact sales less, and we want the infrastructure that all of this is running on to be more cost efficient, right? That would be what a huge win would look like. And Feature Ops gives you not only the way to measure that, but also the way to control it through the life cycle of that feature, so that in the early days, you can get some early feedback maybe from internal users, then roll it out to beta users, then roll it out to only customers, maybe say in North America, and then roll it out globally. And so as you are increasing the deployment of that feature, you can get more information, and so that you can optimize it and improve it before it gets exposed to everybody. And the reason this is important is because there's a kind of infamous outage that happened a couple of years ago with Sonos. Sonos is like they're a music speaker connected system, rabid fan base. Like people who love Sonos will not shut up about it, at least until a couple of years ago. it was just known for being not only great audiophile equipment, but just a great experience. Everything seamlessly worked together. And Sonos was actually quite effective from a DevOps perspective. They had an internal engineering blog that they were always talking about, hey, we're on Kubernetes now. We're using containers. We're doing CI/CD. We're doing all these things. We're monitoring with Datadog. And yet, probably because of the pointy-headed business people, no offense, people have accused me of being a pointy-headed business person myself, so I say that with love, decided that they were releasing a new set of headphones. And they wanted to make this a really big release. They wanted to unveil it to the market all at once. They wanted to release new headphones. They wanted to release a new version of the Sonos actual hardware, mobile application, all at the same time, so that you had all of this working together, you'd have this great experience. In order to do that, they held a bunch of changes that they wanted to make until this big bang release. Not surprisingly, since I'm talking about it on this podcast, the outcome wasn't everybody loved it and applauded. The outcome was it broke everything. And it took them literally months to unwind all of it. And they took this brand loyalty that they had accumulated through blood, sweat, and tears over the last couple of years and just flushed down the toilet. And I'm really not exaggerating. It's like their market cap tanked. They lost over $100 million and just lost direct revenue, not in addition to the market capitalization and brand equity. And the reason is because they didn't follow what they were saying on their own blog. Again, when the CEO says jump, you say how high, and they, instead of making many small changes, rolling them out incrementally, saying, hey, we're gonna make the new version of the mobile application and our hardware and the headphones only work. It's like you have to have the latest generation hardware, the latest generation mobile app, and the new headphones, and you're gonna have a mind-blowing experience. For everybody else, people that are on 4 generations ago, we're not sure how it's going to work yet. So we're not going to try to do that now. We're not going to try to do it all at once. And Feature Ops looks at it from the perspective of, okay, what's the experience that we're trying to create? And how do we know categorically that we're creating that experience? Let's measure the user experience as we roll these products out. Let's do it in small batches over time. And by doing that, instead of focusing on internal code pipelines and focusing on the thing that customers ultimately care about, we believe that you can learn faster, which means that you can innovate more, and you could ultimately grow your business. And so the pillars of Feature Ops are things like continuous release of controlled release of features. And so that you build something and you know who is going to get access to it. We call it surgical rollback. So if ever there's an issue, you can roll it back very surgically. And there's technical reasons why this is important. Security and governance, especially in the enterprise space, when you are rolling something out, right? That could potentially be a security issue. So you want to make sure that everything is controlled. Who is able to authorize a rollback? Does it need to be approved? This is really important. Imagine if you're in financial services. And then really measuring the life cycle of this. We call it feature life cycle management. So a little bit of a mouthful and boring if you're not an insider. However, it's this idea that if I'm a product manager in the very early stages, I have this idea, then it becomes code. Then that's code is something that someone can use. I need to measure that, understand it, and then roll it out, roll it back. Sometimes I kill the feature because it doesn't work. Sometimes I roll it out globally. There's a life cycle to a feature, and Feature Ops kind of gives you a language to talk about that, but also control mechanisms so that you can understand what's working, what's not.
I'm going to tie what I'm hearing to DevOps, like CI/CD. So what's the purpose of a dev environment? What's the purpose of a QA environment? And I'm not like an expert in this in any way, but based off my experience playing around with those environments, it's like when you hear, hey, here's something in the dev environment, you're not expecting it to be performant. It's really to evaluate like maybe feature completeness, to see the feature working in code, but it might be clunky a little bit. There might be some use cases or regressions happening, but it's like a safe space to, test out ideas, right? And then QA, it's, hey, we're going to stress test this feature and make sure that, and then run automated testing, which is something that I've really learned to appreciate from the QA team in my current role, a Produce Pay. Shout out to Nisha, if you're listening to this, I'd be very surprised. But it's like it used to be really annoying to have when you're a really, I think, like ambitious product person, all of the realities of shipping scalable software, like having these like use case reviews with the QA team to make sure that, okay, we want to make sure that like we have your requirements in the testing software correctly, and that we're testing things that even matter to the success of this feature.
Mm.
And so when I think about like beta users, alpha, beta users, that's something that I've always tried to do. I've attempted. I don't feel like I've ever really successfully done it because I end up being in early stage startups trying to find product market fit. But the one struggle I've always had with trying to do this is, I think, and maybe like I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, that when you say, oh, we're going to do an alpha or a beta, it sounds like hedging to leadership of no, just launch it to everybody and we'll see what sticks and we'll ship to learn, right? But I think the best product people, and I even think like product marketers, know that a beta is effectively a very targeted segment of like people that we know are going to be a little bit more forgiving of an earlier version of a product. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And like, how do you go about finding that beta group, and how do you target like who's going to go within this rollback to
Yeah.
even automate it in the first place? Because like I've always had that challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, you said a lot there. So let me start, and if I miss something, then just let me know and we can dive deeper. The first thing is in terms of the hedging. I think this is, though well intentioned, I think that's a mistake. And the mistake is, the reality is that none of us know as much as we think we know. And you can either have a kind of a data-driven, experimentation-driven culture where you are guided by the data. And like, I'm familiar with the Henry Ford quote. If you ask people what they wanted, they would have told you they want a faster horse. Like, it's not that there's not room to guide the market. There absolutely is. However, there's also room to be guided by the market. And I think it's in combination of a strong vision combined with strong listening that animates the best companies in the world. And this is why, for instance, Amazon is customer obsessed, right? I think Amazon is a pretty successful company, and they have strong vision, right? They've literally changed dozens of markets, and yet they're customer obsessed because they understand that if they do what the customer wants, then they're going to make a lot of money. And so when you think about beta testing, in my view, and the view of Unleash as the way that we're building the product as an enabler of this, but also the way that we build our own product, is it's better to have a smaller number of people that really want to co-create with you than it is to have a larger number of people that don't give a crap and that aren't going to give you feedback. And some things are hard to test. Maybe to just use my overloading the Amazon example, but if you have millions of users and it's like you can run a new version of the page and get statistical significance like that, maybe there are instances where it's okay, you can't just do a 50-50 test. But even there, I think the number of things that are like that are relatively rare, and you're more likely to be able to understand more with a smaller group. And small is relative, right? If you're Amazon, it could be hundreds of thousands of people. If you're much smaller, it could be a dozen people. You could learn a lot from really deep engagement with a dozen people in this beta group, because they're going to help you understand what success looks like. And so from a technical targeting perspective, it's quite easy with a tool like Unleash. One of the things that we enable you to do is identify these cohorts that you want to run your, say, a new feature with, or it could be an experiment, A/B test, multivariate, whatever it is. You have a cohort of users and you want to identify this cohort versus this cohort. That technically is very easy to accomplish with the tool. And it is interesting, but it's not, I think, for the purpose of this conversation, just assume that's the case. The bigger question is, like, from a business perspective, how do we identify the people that should be part of that beta group? And there, one of the ways is just through product research, customer engagement, identifying customers that just like to be on the latest and greatest, try the new stuff. Sometimes if you have feature requests, people that have ask for a feature request. We happen to be open source, so we have the benefit of people creating issues on GitHub. Those might be feature requests, they might be bug requests. And so when you fix it, that's a natural person to reach out to and say, hey, we have this new version. Would you like to test it? I think those deep human relationships that are intermediated by software, but are not driven by software, are a great way to build those cohorts. And then when you bring that to the executive team, it's really meaningful. It's, hey, this person at one of our top customers really likes this new feature, and this is why we believe that it's worth investing in. Or, hey, we actually thought that we were building this with this customer in mind, and we actually ran it by it, and it turns out that they're not using the product the way we thought they were, and this is what we learned, and this is what we're going to do instead. That richness of feedback, I think, is oftentimes a lot more useful than this cohort converted at this percentage and this cohort converted this percentage. Because unless it's dramatically different, sometimes it's hard to interpret that data, and you can interpret it in a lot of different ways. So did that approximate what you were asking?
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's a fantastic answer. If you could segment the crap out of your email newsletter, because I think email marketing is a lot more mature of a field. And once a field, I guess the maturity of a field could be indicated by how much A/B testing, like segmentation software, exists. So maybe this is a signal that maybe we're finally growing up as a job family. But I'm going to double click on, it might be better to have, in my vocabulary, like a few design partners, especially in enterprise, where you're never going to have millions of customers. It's going to be maybe most of your revenue is coming from maybe 10 large customers, and you might have a long tail of smaller businesses if that's the case. And I really believe this down in my bones, and I think it's evidenced by what on the media and YouTube, is that problems, like the first principles of any problem space, don't change year over year. I think that's what's so powerful about like jobs to be done framework, is that, hey, just because they're different businesses, the thesis that like each one is a special snowflake is only true to a certain extent. Maybe like the only difference is the team, like the humans and the values that there. But FP&A, payables, receivables, accounting, shipping, software features, there's repeatable patterns to create a product around, and that they always happen. And so needing to get to statistical significance of we need to do this, we need to have this many like customers verify and validate this assumption might not be correct, because let's say that one of your customers is a thought leader in the industry and other companies like to copy their best practices, which I think is very common in tech, right? Is that there are like more like thought leadership type companies that heavily influence how people operate. We did it in this podcast. We're like, oh, this is how Netflix does it. This is how Amazon does it. And they're successful, right? And that if you could target that like segment of like early adopters, thought leaders who tend to have YouTube channels where they talk about their opinion about a certain workflow, or they tend to speak at conferences and are very influential in other businesses in your segment, like getting that one person to provide, like, I guess like the point of contact of the company to provide like their opinion on like where you should go with your roadmap is like a force multiplier that I think is very underrated. I know it sounds woo-woo to some people listening to this, but I just really believe like really good like reference customers beats out like killing yourself over data and statistics to find out what's going to be successful.
Yeah, not every customer is created equal, and it's not a moral judgment or a value judgment. I think every company should know who their ICP is, not their insane clown posse, but their ideal customer profile. I still, like, as a kid of the 90s, I can't hear ICP.
That's a deep cut.
Not think insane clown posse, or make the joke about it. My team is listening, they're groaning because I thought the first time I made that joke, but You have to know who your ICP is. And if you roll out a feature to 100 customers and 95 hate it and 5 love it, that doesn't mean you did a bad job. If the 5 that love it are in your ICP, it may mean that you need to fire 95 customers and go and replace them with ones that are in your ideal customer profile. And I think this is the value of those beta groups, because you can really be very picky. You decide who gets into it. It's not a democracy. I'm going to pick the companies. I'm going to pick the users that I'm going to spend my time with. Maybe I shadow them while they're using the feature, or I do an interview, or I just look more at the web analytics or the product metrics that are coming from them, because you can't be all things to all people. I think what you just said captures that spirit perfectly. You can't be all things to all people. And if you want to go after a particular audience, you got to find people in that audience that are going to be able to give you like honest feedback about what it means for them. And all the better if they're also an influencer. But I think if they don't have to be, as long as they are in your ICP, right? Because then you're going to know that if I do create the product in that way, then eventually I'm going to find that influencer. They're going to say great things about it because it's going to feel like magic.
And I feel like what your team is trying to do is to effectively enable like strategic thinking and like better product strategy, because I think the absence of having beta groups or very targeted segments is pretty prevalent. The average tenure of a product leader is 18 months. That's the default. Half the time they get exited. And I've worked for people like that. Every company I've gone to, the product leader gets exited at some point. And so like I'm usually going through 2 like heads of product or CPOs wherever I go. It's just the nature of the game. And if I were to like create an archetype of the half that usually get exited really fast, there's just a lack of focus. It's just shipping a bunch of ideas. It doesn't matter if those ideas are orthogonal to the main offer of the business, or they're just trying to start like new business units. There's a lack of focus on the ICP, which I think just for the users, I'm just going to explain it really quick. It's effectively like the target like market segment, and it informs how you position your product. I didn't really know what ICP was because I feel like it's more of a commercial like team like sales jargon. So I'll just cover that potential edge case of like listeners being like, okay, what ICP? Yeah. So it's okay.
Your target persona in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Target persona. It's like the same. It's basically the same thing. And where was I? Yeah, you've gotten me very thoughtful, or I'm just like my brain's not working with age. Who knows? But I'll just tie up a loose end because I've totally dropped the ball on this comment. But like why do people get exited? It's like you're not stacking the deck in your favor. It's like very unstrategic. Like when you hear about like Intercom turning around their business, they're like, we're just going to focus on customer support. They had all these other products, and they had a 40% exit rate after the CEO like returned back to the helm after taking a hiatus. And that's that famous story of Steve Jobs like cutting all the products once he came back to Apple and just focusing on like a few certain things. It's not because customer service was, I don't know, like the best idea. He had a target segment in mind of when they were going to create Thin, and that offering had the most promise for a segment that they were experts in, and they had relationships and distribution, like hundreds of thousands of customers, that they knew that they could test out this AI thing. And yeah, what you guys are trying to do is basically enable that through software, which I guess isn't really operationalized until there's like software that supports it. I don't know, but
yeah, and our mission as a company is to make developers' lives easier, and developers are the ones who are building the software, but they partner with product managers. And one of the big, I guess, animating principles of making developers' lives easier should be easier to collaborate. And then the purpose of collaboration, you need to collaborate with product managers, you're collaborating with your customers. And making it easy to be able to say, okay, we have these ideas and we want to, one, get them out as quickly as possible, right? There's a whole operational mechanics of under the hood. There's these things called feature flags, which allow you to turn off or turn on functionality in real time in production environments very safely and in a very controlled manner. That's like that's the mechanism by which Unleash does what it does. But once you have that and you can measure this version of the application versus this version, now all of a sudden, engineering leaders and product managers can make decisions together on, are we moving in the right direction, right? What do our customers really like? What are they engaging with? If we change this, does that lead to an increase or a decrease in this metric or that metric? It's, oh, we do this and conversions go up, but oh no, the product manager is excited, but the engineering leaders, yeah, that's great, but actually we're seeing more error rates or our infrastructure costs are going up because like we're pulling in this thing that uses a lot more memory. And so like now we know we want to keep the user experience, but we need to optimize on the back end. Like the kind of the instrumentation of all of that and the control mechanisms are super, super important. And this is essentially what we call feature op, this model of operating that's really about what touches the customer, not the internal things that are really important. I'm not dismissing DevOps and CI/CD. It's really important. It just only gets you so far. Where the rubber really hits the road is when you're interacting directly with the thing that the customer cares about. I think it brings gets a product a bigger seat at the table, gets engineering a bigger seat at the table. Because the reality in my view is that the people that can actually build the product, like business people are important too, but this is technology. If you can't understand how to build things, how they work, then I think you're going to have a really hard time running the business. And I think a lot of engineering leaders are unfairly relegated to the basement, right? Oh, you're someone that like sits at your computer, doesn't interact with people. And in fact, you are solving the problems of the 21st century, which is intermediated through code. So we think it's a big cultural shift as well in terms of how product and engineering teams can show up at the table and at a really strategic table, at a board level conversation, because you understand what's working, what's not.
Yeah. And I think creating like a shared sheet music to read from, I think where B2B SaaS failed is because of ironically, it's probably because of the whole ICP framework where it's there's different, but like potentially redundant tools being procured, like digital whiteboard software. Engineering team likes Whimsical, design team likes FigJam. Product managers like Lucid Chart. I've seen that use case before where it's, wow, we have 3 subscriptions for very similar experiences. Now, where I think the winners in this like world are what they're doing is they're making a tool that could be used by multiple departments to have a shared artifact. So FigJam was at play. Figma really focused on designers, but then they made it easy for other people to be involved in the process, like be able to view and collaborate. And then they started adding more tools that like make it so that anybody can use Figma like to get their work done. And from what I'm hearing here, it makes me think about like Launch Darkly. Like I've worked at a bunch of companies that use Launch Darkly, but like it's always an awkward conversation with engineering. I don't know why. Could I have a seat to like log in and stuff? Like it's like product management is usually they should be, but they're not they don't tend to be like in engineering's like tools because of like budget constraints and stuff. So what I'm hearing here is, okay, like what's different this time around with Unleash is that it's intended to facilitate better collaboration and communication.
Yeah,
around,
we believe it should be open. There can be good reasons to restrict, but as an open source project, like open in the broad sense of the word is really important to us. And projects within an organization should be open by default. That means that you can see the flags. That doesn't mean you can turn something off in production unless you're scoped for that role. However, you should be able to see and collaborate. And we love it when our customers bring in product managers and engineers into the same tool, because a lot of times it's the product manager who talking about that life cycle. Okay, what are how do we know if we should roll this out to 100%? A developer could be like, shrug emoji. It's not that they are not capable of answering that question. It's just they don't have the full context to answer that question, because they're looking at a certain set of metrics from like a Grafana dashboard, and okay, like not getting any errors, like memory and CPU look good, but does that mean customers love the product? That's a different set of metrics. We call this full stack experimentation in our parlance, where it's like you have for any feature this full stack of things. You have stuff that's happening on the back end that's super important. You have like business conversion metrics. You have customer voice, customer thumbs up, thumbs down, feedback, and you to know whether something's working, you need people from a bunch of different departments. And so you want all of those people to have visibility into what's happening, to be able to answer their own question. And then I think about it as like a board meeting when you have your head of sales and your head of marketing and your head of operation, and they all have a different perspective. And the CEO is the one who's ultimately going to make that decision. Product teams are similar, right? The board meeting is about, are we moving in the right direction? And so engineering clearly has a seat at the table, and that's where Unleash comments start. But product managers have a seat at that table as well. Engineers are not the only ones who decide if something's working or it's not. You need product managers, increasingly customer success or customer experience or UX has a big seat at the table as well. And it's only by instrumenting and measuring that full stack that you can really understand the impact that you're having. And when you really understand the impact you're having, you can go incredibly fast, which at the end of the day is what it's all about, because you're always going to get things wrong. And you just want to figure it out as quickly as possible so you can go back and fix it and roll it out again. This is what Netflix taught us, is the faster you can go around that cycle of learning, creating, doing, like that's what leads to incredible market share gains. That's what we try to enable at Unleash.
Well, I usually ask guests, what do you feel like hasn't been said that should be said to provide closure? But I just feel like you tied a really nice bow on that conversation.
I think I got it all off my chest, and this has been really fun. It's obviously something I'm very passionate about, and it's a fun time to be in tech. There's a lot that's changing.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us are nervous and excited all on the same day over lots of different things, but the reality is software is more and more important. And so people that get to build and run software are in a really unique position right now. And so I just get to enjoy coming on podcasts like this and talking about it, and then doing the hard work in my day job as well.
Yeah. So how can people find you, find your work?
Probably the best is just hitting me up on LinkedIn. So it's Ferranti, Ferranti, and the letter M. That's my handle across all the major social networks, but the one that I'm most active on is LinkedIn. So feel free to send me an invite. Happy to chat. And then you can also find my company at getunleashed.io. If you need any help with your kind of accelerating your product journey, we're happy to talk to you over there as well.
All right, sounds good. Michael, thank you so much. Likewise, it was a real pleasure. And I just wanted to say that I really admire your ability to take what might be considered like a boring topic for the typical product management. We didn't really talk about AI too much. Sorry, guys. But I found this conversation really interesting, and you kind of did like the whole Big Short treatment of like you took like credit default swaps and made it into an interesting story. So I just wanted to give you a shout out for that. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Yeah.
My pleasure.
And you have a good one.
You too.
Hey listener, thanks again for listening to The Way of Product. As we power down today's session on the fusion of creativity and technology, let's solidify the energy you've gotten from our dialogue today. If you've gleaned insights or strategies that could turbocharge your projects, I have a small but powerful ask. Swing by the platform where you're hearing this and leave a review. Think of it as your digital high five to us. It's a fuel that propels this content to more creative technologists like you, amplifying the impact of the shared knowledge. So until our next interview, keep pioneering and pushing the envelope. Thanks again for lending your ears and your imagination to our community. Catch you on the next download.